Dinner doesn't get much easier than this. You only need 4 ingredients and 1 pot to make a delicious fettuccine alfredo from scratch. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today's recipe is for a 1-pot fettuccine alfredo, and it is so easy to make. I'm gonna use the Ninja Foodi Possible Cooker Pro because it has a nice deep pot and it just works great. But you could use a pot on the stove or a deep skillet on the stove, or you could use your Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper on the sear saute function. Any appliance that has a deep enough pot to hold all of the pasta. Now let's talk about the pasta. I'm using dried fettuccine noodles. Now you could use a spaghetti noodle or another type of pasta, but your timing is going to be a little bit different and your liquid amounts may be different as well. So you're gonna have to use your judgment in that. I'm using 1 pound of fettuccine noodles that are dried. You can use fresh, and fresh pasta is absolutely delicious, but not in this recipe, or your timing will be totally off, okay? Because we're basing the timing on dried fettuccine noodles. I'm using 1 pound because I feel like for a family of 4 to 6, that is what you would use to serve one dinner. However, fettuccine Alfredo is best served immediately, and it does not reheat that well unless you add cream and maybe a little bit more cheese. So I recommend only making what you're gonna serve. And I've done all the work for you already. It is on my website, thesaltedpepper.com, so you can find out if you wanna use 4 ounces of fettuccine noodles, how much of the other ingredients do you need, 8 ounces, 1 pound, up to 2 pounds. This pot can easily fit 2 pounds of pasta, but the ingredients change, the liquid changes, and the timing changes a little bit, okay? All right, so for this, we're gonna do 1 pound. We're gonna go right in. This is a cold pot. I haven't even turned it on yet. And the important thing when you do this is take about a handful of the fettuccine, put it down on the bottom of the pot, take your second handful, and sort of crisscross, okay? This is going to allow the fettuccine to cook more evenly than if you just dumped it all in and it clumped up, okay? So it's kind of important. Which is another reason why I really like using this pot. Now, if you were doing a skillet on the stove, you would try to get as close to crisscross as you could. It'll depend on the width of your pot, of course. All right, last few in. So 1 pound of pasta. To 1 pound of pasta, we're gonna use 1 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt or kosher salt. Now, ordinarily when you're cooking pasta with a big pot on the stove, you make the water salty like the sea. But for this, we don't wanna add too much salt because we're not gonna need to drain this pasta, which makes this 1 pot meal super easy. You're gonna want 5 cups of cold water. And when I say cold water, I don't mean like ice water or anything, just cold water right out of the kitchen sink is what I use. Then take some tongs or another kitchen appliance and sort of push the pasta down under the water as much as possible. There will be a little bit that's above the water, that's fine. You don't need to add any more liquid because if you do, then you're gonna have a runny Alfredo or you're gonna have to drain your noodles, and we don't wanna be dealing with that. We want this to be super easy. Put the lid on, that's very important. And I will say that I recommend, if you're facing this way, put the steam hole towards the back when you're using the Possible Cooker Pro, because we will go in here midway through the cooking process and sort of toss the noodles around. And if it's up here, you tend to reach over it and you can get a steam burn, okay? So keep it in the back. Turn it on and we're gonna go to sear saute. High is what we want, and hit start. The pot's gonna go through the preheat process, which takes about 5 minutes, and then we're gonna cook the pasta to al dente. And for me, that is about 15 minutes. Now your al dente may be a little less cooked or a little more cooked. So you can certainly taste the pasta and go by your preference of how you like it cooked, okay? Now, the Parmesan cheese, that is the star of the show. However, I don't get a very, expensive or aged Parmesan cheese, which I know people will be like, what? I get the grocery store kind because it's a little bit milder. So a Parmesan Reggiano, which I think is pretty traditional in this recipe, is a little bit too sharp for me. So I like to use just a more mild brand, but whatever Parmesan cheese that you love, you can use. You need a total of 8 ounces. And what I did here, because I weighed this out and it was actually 8.5 ounces. And I thought, well, it's a recipe. We want to be precise, right? So I cut off the rind. But when I cut off the rind, I don't have a total of 8 ounces. So I ended up just taking a 1/2 ounce of the rind off, which was the very edge, and I'm gonna throw the rest of it in. I have also not even bothered with that and just thrown the whole thing in the food processor and grated it up, and it works fine. Okay, so you can use the rind or not use the rind. It's totally up to you. For this, to show you guys how it works, I'm just gonna use the whole thing. So this is actually 8.5 ounces. Now, can you use the bag kind of Parmesan? I do not recommend it. And the reason being is because we're going to put this through 2 different processes. We are going to shred it, and then we are going to chop it up almost into a powdery form. The reason being is that it's super important that it melts very quickly and creates the Alfredo sauce. And the bag kind just seems to tend to clump up and get a little bit stringy, just does not work as well. So when you're making this with only 4 ingredients and no cream, I don't recommend the bag kind. If the bag kind is all you have, go ahead and use it, but use a little bit of cream too, okay? All right, so I have a food processor here. The fine shredding blade is in there. It's all set up for shredding. And now I'm just gonna remove this and we're just gonna get it shredded up here. So cut your cheese into chunks that will fit into your size food processor. So that'll be a little bit different for each one. And then we're just gonna feed them through. Now this is gonna be loud, I'm not gonna talk over it. So turn it on. I go to the disc function. All right, so that's about 3 cups for the shred that my food processor does. Your volume is going to be different. That's why with cheese, because the shreds can be different sizes, you do want to go by ounces. So it's a total of 8 ounces. And I've got those whole rinds down the bottom, but we're going to pulverize those. All right, so now I'm going to put the blade in the food processor. Now you could also use a fine shredder. Like I sometimes use my zester if I'm only making a few servings, but when I have 8 ounces to do, this appliance makes it super easy. Now we'll pour this cheese back in. And now I'm gonna go to the pulse function. And I'm just gonna pulse this until it is very fine. You don't want to let the food processor run, and actually you probably want to put this in just so it doesn't fly out either. But you don't want to let the food processor run on pulse or any of the other functions for this because you'll create too much heat. You will start to gum up your cheese. So please, if you're using your food processor, use the pulse. All right, that looks good. Now we'll remove the lid and the blade. Now some of the rind did not get as fine as I like it because I had cut it off. So if you're gonna use your rind, leave it in a big chunk so it actually shreds first and then will break up into this fine powder. And when I say fine powder, let me not use words that then it may not turn out that way for you. I would say it's about like breadcrumbs, okay? So maybe even a panko. That is about the texture of it, but that's gonna work perfectly for this recipe. All right, so that's done, and we are now 3 minutes into our cooking process. I don't even see any steam yet. That's perfectly fine. Leave it alone, just let it cook. When it reaches about 7 or 8 minutes, I'll go in and do a little toss with the tongs, and we'll let it finish cooking. And then we'll get the rest of the ingredients in and we will dish up this creamy, delicious Alfredo. We're 7 minutes in and now is a good time to just toss the pasta. So just remove the lid and take some tongs and go in and just toss it around. And that's just gonna help it cook evenly and not clump up for you. Lid back on, and we will wait until the time says 15 minutes. Now, what I've noticed happening, of course, it's always so funny when things happen on video that don't happen during the testing, but it's good learning. So if you start to see a whole bunch of bubbles rising up like this and your top starts spewing out and making this kind of strange noise, just lift the lid a little bit and let the steam out, okay? Obviously, the steam hole isn't doing as well of a job here for some reason, and it just is building up too much of the steam under there. So you can just kind of vent it a little bit more. That's why it's important when appliances come with steam holes like this that you don't plug them, because when you plug them, you change what's going on in the pot and you can alter the recipe timing, okay? All right, we can put it back down, and if it does it again, I'll just do that again. It's been about 14 minutes, and now you can take the lid off, because now is a good time to test for doneness. So mix up your pasta and then take one out and let it cool here for a minute. And then we'll give it a taste. And when they are done to your liking, you can turn the pot off. We're gonna go on keep warm to finish it up. Now, one thing I will say is that the pasta will continue to cook just a little bit longer. Oh, that's perfect. Let's go ahead and turn this off. Oh, that's so perfect. For me, it might be different for you. Still got a nice chew to it, and I know it's still going to cook a little bit longer. It is so important that you turn the pot off and you let the boiling sort of subside a little bit before we go on to the next step, especially adding the cheese. You could add the butter now, but not the cheese, because what will happen is the heat's too high and it'll start to split the cheese and you won't have this nice, creamy, cohesive Alfredo sauce, okay? What I like to do is go on keep warm. Give this a little stir around. It looks like we've got a good amount of liquid in there. I should not need to add any more. We're gonna add in 1/2 cup or 1 stick of salted butter. If you wanna use unsalted, that's perfectly fine. Now toss this around to start to melt the butter, which is gonna combine with the pasta water that we have left. And now we're gonna slowly add in the cheese. The butter doesn't have to be all the way melted to start this. When I say slowly, I mean slowly. 1 handful at a time, broadcast over the top, and mix it in, okay? Let that melt, and then we will repeat until all the cheese is gone. Now, if you wanted to make shrimp Alfredo, now would be the time to add in your thawed shrimp, because they're gonna cook really quickly. So they'll cook during this process just based on the residual heat of the pasta dish. If you wanted to add chicken to it, that's a little bit different. And what I would recommend, you could obviously cook the chicken and then add it in at the end. That would be fine. But if you want to cook the chicken in with it, refer to my written article on my website, because it is a little bit different of a process. All right, I'll put in 2 handfuls now and just keep mixing. You want to make sure that you let each addition of the cheese melt into the sauce. If you add too much at once, it's going to cool things down too much, and then you're not going to have this super creamy Alfredo sauce. You're just going to have little clumps of cheese. So I've been pretty careful about when I'm adding more. You know, I'm letting it melt. I've been using just about 1 handful at a time, but we are going to use it all. All right, there we go. Final mix, and then we can serve. All right, this is looking beautiful, but I do want to add just a splash or two of hot water. So maybe 2 tablespoons just to thin out that sauce just a little bit, because as it cools, it's going to thicken. And even on keep warm, it will thicken just a little bit more. And I want it just a little bit looser. All right, that is looking absolutely gorgeous. And now it is time to plate up your fettuccine Alfredo made in one pot with 4 ingredients. It's going to be delicious. Now, it's up to you if you want to garnish with some black pepper, if you want to garnish with a little parsley. That is not really traditional, but it's certainly fine to do, and it makes a great visual appearance here. And the black pepper, I usually do add it because it is delicious on top, and I like a coarse cracked pepper. But for this, I'm just going to taste it just as is, so we'll go over here. We've got, oh my gosh, this is so good. I could even probably have added a little bit more water to this, but it's going to be delicious. There's nothing like a true fettuccine Alfredo. It is so incredibly delicious. The pasta's cooked perfectly. The cheese flavor comes through. It doesn't have any of those artificial type of flavorings that you can get from the jars. It's just as quick, honestly, as making it with the jar, in my opinion, anyway. So easy, so delicious. You're gonna love it.